Well, hey, podcast listeners, in episode 55 of the Pixar Post podcast, we're going to continue our deep dive into the Cars 3 press event. This time, we're going to talk with Bobby Podesta, the Supervising Animator on Cars 3, Michael Fong, Supervising Technical Director, and Jon Reisch, the Effects Supervisor. They presented on the production pipeline and dove into staying flexible with changes and the technical challenges they faced, the largest being the mud. So,
the mud.
So what do you say we get going?
Yes.
All right. What do we always start off with?
Oh, no. It's quiz questions.
That's right. Well, it's only one this time. We're going to keep it pretty basic.
Okay, good, because I did not prepare a question for you this week.
That's fine. We were getting a lot done this last week with some product reviews and some other things, so I tried to keep this one a little light for you.
Okay.
All right. So, in Cars 2, Mater and Lightning are driving back into town after doing some tractor tipping. What movie is listed on the drive-in movie theater marquee? Okay. Would you like your options?
No. I know it.
Did you look into this already?
No.
I guess that's true. You didn't say you prepped any questions. All right.
The Incredimobiles.
Yeah, now how did you know that?
I just have a good memory. I just know that one.
Wow, I thought for sure I was going to get you with that one.
Yeah, no, I got that one. That one was an easy one for me.
All right, I like it.
Just obscure, weird ones.
The options I was going to give were Incredimobiles. These are other ones I made up. Monster Trucks Incorporated, Once Upon a Tractor, and a Bug's Life, in quotes for bugs, like, the Volkswagens. Yeah. Well, fine.
Yeah, I got that one. That one was a good one. Easy.
All right.
Did any of you guys think it was easy? Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. All right, so a couple other things Cars 3 news related. So one of the things I want to talk about very specifically is a particular toy / RC car / companion that's over my right shoulder right now.
You are obsessed.
I kind of do love Sphero's Ultimate Lightning McQueen. He came out May 24th. I love his interaction, how he leans into his turns. I won't go into our review again because I did a 20-minute in-depth review.
Yeah, you did a very in-depth review.
Yeah, I really wanted to get into it because I really liked him.
Mm-hmm.
But at first, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And I think those are sometimes, it's kind of like, I feel like it's when you throw on a song that, when you hear it right away and you love it, it becomes one of those songs that just comes and burns out and then goes away. But it's one of those ones that has grown on me. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, therefore, because it's growing on me, I'm going to like it longer. Mm-hmm. But I really feel that way about this. So as you continue to explore it, you continue to find more and more cool things. Like all the different phrases that he says. He has over 300 different phrases.
That's crazy.
That are part of this. And if you guys haven't seen the review video, at least go check it out, whether you have 20 minutes to watch the whole thing or not. I did it because I figure if somebody's going to invest, because this thing is $300 for an RC car / toy / robot in a way.
Yeah, it's pricey, and you really reviewed like the whole gamut of what he can do. You watched Cars with him and showed how he responds in real time to watching
the movie.
Cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool.
You showed how you can make you could set up a whole script so he can basically talk to you for a minute or two and say exactly what you had programmed him to say.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Oh, and the donuts too.
Yeah, doing donuts
as
you drive. Yeah, it's fun. I tested them out on all different surfaces, hard surfaces, streets, which, by the way, you'd think RC car, take it outside. I'm going to be doing another video as well to kind of give some highlights about the lessons learned and FAQs that I've learned from Sphero, from my own usage as well, in continuing past even the review video. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, Sphero says, this is an indoor toy.
Yeah.
Don't take it outside.
Yeah.
If you want the wheels to last, don't drive it outside, because
And that was actually my concern when we took it outside.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to get dirty. It's going to get...
I was fine with the dirty because you can wash it off.
I know, but still, I was just like, this doesn't feel like an outside vehicle.
Well, they basically say that there's no way to replace the tires, so if you burn through them...
Yeah.
tough luck. So you're not giving Lightning any pit stops.
Yeah, nice.
Pit
stop.
Yeah. So I think the only other thing I'll say about it here is that since it's an app-based toy, so you have to have a smartphone, Android or iOS, I love the fact that updates can happen. So these phrases, potentially more phrases could come. In fact, I would anticipate it if, and we're only hoping here, that right now he interacts when you watch the movie Cars. I'd love to see him interact with Cars 2, and even more importantly...
potentially Cars 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think I could, envision...
with those new phrases.
That's what I'm seeing. There could be some new phrases there.
Especially with the Cars 3 release.
What do you mean?
With him saying new phrases for Cars 3.
Oh, like new lines that will become catchphrases and
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I just like the idea that it has some potential future updates associated with it as well, because so many toys you get, like if you buy a toy that's a talking toy and you press the button on it and it says a couple lines, it's only for that.
You can basically siphon through or go around the horn and have your
3 times
6 phrases in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But this is a ton.
Yeah, and it's stuff that you wouldn't experience until you do certain things. So for instance, when I accidentally rolled him off of a curb while driving, again, won't be taking him back outside again.
He's okay though.
Yeah, he's fine. Luckily landed pretty softly, sort of. But he can take, he's not a toy that's easily broken either. He's built very solidly.
Yeah.
But when you do tip him over, he says, "I'll never tip a tractor over again." And he's like, "Hey,
in my life,
and he's like, "Can I get a little help here?" So that's kind of cool.
Your garage is upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fun stuff. So, I mentioned the tips and tricks that I'm going to do, share some of those other things about how to clean him as well. Mm-hmm. So Spiro says, don't use any cleaners, just use baby wipes, essentially.
Baby wipes, yeah.
So there's other little things that we can talk about. But the last thing that I wanted to call out from it was a thanks to you for when I was trying to determine where we're going to test this, because testing it in a house is hard as far as...
You just need a big open space.
You need a big open space. You're going to crash into chairs in your kitchen or the hallway walls. You've got, maybe some shoes there. Yeah, it's just, there's too much in the way. So we needed a bigger space, and you called a local gym, and you found a space for us. It was awesome. Went in there, and the guy's like, "Oh, I totally know what you're going to do. Let's bring you back here." They turned on the lights. They gave me full reign of this room by myself, basically as long as I wanted. They're like, "Just until we close." I'm like, okay. So...
I know, because I am a genius. I make stuff happen.
All right, there you go. That is true. You do make stuff happen.
I do.
But it was kind of fun. So I went there by myself, and I had, obviously, my phone for the setup that I was... the remote control portion.
Took your phone, my phone, a different camera, and then you had a GoPro on your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a head-mounted thing, and the owner comes in, and he starts talking to me while I'm in there, and I'm like, don't mind all this. So it's kind of cool. Lots of outtakes of me smashing into things or even my own feet. Mm-hmm. So anyways, if you haven't seen it, check it out. If you have any questions about that car, let me know as well. I'd be happy to answer them or dig into them for you. The other thing I just wanted to touch on real quick is we did it kind of ad hoc last minute at the end of last week, where we did the Cars 3 smoothie test.
Oh, yeah.
And it was in relation to the Dole National Eat More Fruits and Vegetables Day, which was the 24th or 25th last
one of
week.
Those days.
Mm-hmm. And it was just a really fun thing that we kind of just did off the cuff. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out.
Yeah, we did it very impromptu at 11:30 at night. Did a Facebook Live video.
YouTube Live.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm still not a smoothie.
And I'm still dreaming about another pineapple pit stop smoothie for me, because that one was the winner. If you haven't seen it, or if you're interested in trying them, we have 2 recipes on our site for the lightning berry smoothie and the pineapple pit stop smoothie. And the pineapple pit stop one was my personal favorite. I loved it. So, and I'm going to be probably having it again probably tomorrow, to be honest. So, All right, any other news or updates that you had initially?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about the main portion of today's podcast. And the post that goes along with this is a little different. It's not a normal show note based post where we're just listing everything, but you'll still be able to find it just on our website. Again, of course, pixarpost.com, and then click on the podcast button in episode 55. But this one is really more of a post and podcast companion piece. And we wanted to provide a little more because just hearing the audio in this instance didn't really get everything across. I thought sometimes going back and having some of the highlights of things that they talked about would be nice to have. And it shows some photos from behind the scenes and other things like that, so be sure to check it out. But in this interview, it starts off with Bobby Podesta, who again is a supervising animator on Cars 3, talking about breaking down the demolition derby scene. He shows research photos of their trips, of how they went to different demolition derbies, and said that it was nutso, I believe was his exact quote. Overall, though, his portion was about the animation and how how him and the rest of the groups work together to support the story. Really good insights there. We'll talk about some of that in a minute as well. But then from Bobby, it went to Jon Reisch, the effects supervisor on the film, and he was up next. He talks about how the effects team is responsible for all natural phenomenon, water, fire, smoke, dust, and debris.
And we've talked to him quite a bit.
Yeah, a couple times for sure.
Past.
Yeah, you did for Good Dinosaur. We've talked to his wife a couple times, Angelique, on Inside Out. Yeah, lots of interaction with them, so I was really happy to not only be in a session with him, but then we had a one-on-one afterwards as well, so we really got to dive in and get geeky on the effects.
Right.
So really what he did is he got into the meat of the discussion was about the mud and the challenges that they talked about. So definitely look and listen in to his conversation for a ton about that, but I also loved that he got into how the Cars 3 team and how the effects team simulated air around an object or a car for the first time. I think we talked about it on another podcast, or maybe it was on one of the video hangouts for the trailer.
It was something we talked about.
But just as a quick refresher, it's as a moment where Lightning McQueen is having his big crash that they've shown in almost all the trailers, and you see the car flipping over, and when you get to the underside of McQueen, you can see the smoke that wraps around
being pushed from the momentum of lightning, like flying through the air.
As air moves, it pulls it in like a circular, like coiling pattern behind it. And he talked about how they do like a fluid simulation first to see what it would look like, and then they can mimic it with other things. Super, super cool. Definitely check that out. I don't want to obviously give away too much.
That is a technical, geeky thing right there.
What's funny is it's one of those things that I think it's really cool because it mirrors real life so much. I mean, they do that so much with lighting, and Michael Fong, the supervising technical director, will talk about that in his portion as well, where he talks about that they break the physics of lights. They don't always have to live by the rules. And in this instance, it was kind of neat with John talking about simulating the airflow around cars because it was real, but yet they can obviously still break it and do different things too. But it's just neat when they pull those things in and make the films that much more realistic.
Right.
So pretty neat stuff. The other thing that definitely listen through the whole interview, because at the end we do our one-on-one, like I mentioned, and we talk with all three of the guys again, and we dig in more on that air, simulating of the air, but then also you're going to want to hear some of what Bobby Podesta has to say about the 3 scenes that he animated for Chick Hicks, and how he kind of just talks about that Chick Hicks never gets any respect in the Cars world, and he has some issues when he's in his presenting booth, because we know he's a Racing Sports Network announcer now. So really, really cool stuff. So be sure to listen all the way through on that.
Interesting. Well, let's listen.
That's absolutely. Let's listen to it now, and then we'll catch you on the back end with some Ask Pixar post and wrap-up comments.
We created for the film. We wanted to talk a little bit about, the pipeline, what goes behind us making our film, and why we made some of the choices we did on Cars 3. So to start out, my name is Bobby Podesta. I'm the supervising animator on Cars 3. And my history actually goes back to the first film. I started on the first film as the first animator on the original Cars back in the summer of 2001. I was on that for a little over 4 years. When we were just trying to figure out how cars would talk or move, it was didn't even know what the world would look like. And it's really exciting to see now, this many years later, which just makes me feel old a little bit, but how the whole world has kind of evolved, with several films and A Cars Land and everything else. And, when we approached this film like we approached, all the films at Pixar, it always starts with something that's kind of visually tangible, right? I mean, this is the beauty of computer animation, and this goes back to the first short we made. And I know everybody here has probably seen the lamp hopping along in our logo, and that comes from this short, Luxo Jr., which came out in 1986. It was the first computer animated short ever nominated for an Academy Award. John Lasseter wrote and directed and animated this. And it was great because he saw a desk lamp on his desk, and he saw this new medium of computer animation and wanted to make something that you could feel like you could reach out and touch. And that was really exciting. And this has just evolved over the years until now we have, Finding Dory that comes out, and you can practically smell the salt in the air. I mean, this thing looks so beautiful, and it feels so tangible. It's wonderful, and this is something we've done in really all of our films. But the thing about making something that's visually tangible, it's really always rooted in something that's emotionally tangible, that dives down to that spot in all of us that we can really relate to. And that starts with, Luxo Jr., which is not a story about a couple of lamps, it's actually a story about parenthood. And Finding Dory isn't a story about a fish, it's actually a story about a character overcoming their own personal obstacle. And this is really, really important because throughout all the Pixar films, we've always tried to find that one thing, the thing that's deep down that is bigger than whatever it is that we're telling the story through, and really touches on something that's very deeply human, that we can all relate to. And that's really where Cars 3 stems from. We also try to start from the same kind of emotional place. So, when we started this film, though, we took advantage of where we've come over the last 10 years. I mean, now we're able to create a film that has a world that's so tangible, that feels like you could reach out and touch it. It's just absolutely stunning. And we have, characters that are equally as stunning. I mean, you see these race cars that are outside that you can reach out and touch. They're beautiful. We have the same thing happening in our film. It's really, really wonderful. And this then plays into what we like to do with the Cars world, where we like to take something that and just give it that little bit of a Cars twist, the kind of carification of the world, which is just fun. And it just helps kind of expand that whole world. But it really comes down to telling a story that's got emotional stakes, that's really rooted in something. So you're going to hear a little bit more about that story with our writers and our story supervisor next door in a little bit. You just came from the group talking about our characters a little more. But for us to talk about the pipeline, to talk about something that was really rooted in something emotional, something you could really feel. And being at this beautiful racetrack here, we thought, what better way to do that than to tell you about emotion through a demolition derby? So you might think I'm sorry, what's a demolition derby have to do with emotion or anything like that? And if you've ever been to a place where you felt in life where you were out of your element, I mean, this is it. We've got a character, Lightning McQueen, who is going through a story, and he's in a spot where he doesn't know where he belongs. He doesn't know his place. He needs to feel out of his element. He needs to feel completely turned around. And having that happen in the demolition derby was a great setting for that. Now, as animators, we need to start with something. We usually start with research. It's really important to us to get the details right. So I talked to my wife, and she said, no, you can't go participate in a demolition derby. And I said, thank you. I can just say you're the one who told me I couldn't do this, because I just didn't want to do this. But we went and we started doing research. We watched a lot of this video footage. These things are crazy. I mean, it's nutso. It looks like a ton of fun, but we wanted to see what's it like when they get all crunched up. Look at that. That's crazy. And we started looking at the pictures, and we started, we had some people in technical go out and see what it's like at these demolition derbies. And from all of this, we then took the animators and the story artists and came together into a story room, and we started trying to come up with ideas. This is actually a picture I took in one of our story rooms where we have a bunch of animators and story artists all crammed in one room. Scott Morris, our story supervisor, who you'll meet, is in there. And we were just trying to come up with ideas. gag ideas, drawings, what it's like if you're this character. If you're an ambulance in Demolition Derby, what would it be like? If you're a school bus in Demolition Derby, what would it be like? How do you get character through that stuff? And then we took these and we came up with all these drawings. And these drawings were then handed out to the animators. So they go back to their desk, they take these drawings, they say, okay, what am I going to do? And they want to start doing animation tests, right? Because we want to start to visually realize what this is so we can present this stuff to our director. So these are early tests. These are so early. I mean, we're drawing a mouth on this Winnebago up here that when he gets knocked over, he scratches his head on the fence. Because honestly, you probably scratch your head on the fence. And you just want to start to get a feeling of what might happen with characters in the middle of this environment. And from this point, then we'll start to cut them into shots. What's it like for McQueen when he's in this environment, when he's down low and he's racing and things are flying past you and he doesn't know which way is up or which way is down. And it starts to paint a picture. It starts to give you a sense of what it's like to be in the middle of this action. And so we can hand this off and we actually start to go into shots. We start to block shots out. We start to see what they're like in the final lighting, when things crash into each other, when you have a taxi cab stuck in the back of an ambulance. Don't ask how that happened. This happens in the Demolition Derby. And then we can start to work with other departments. And they're going to do sets, and they're going to figure out shots, and they're going to start designing these beautiful characters that we can work with and build so that we can start to take this environment and start to flesh it out. So we can build these shots and make it really, really tangible. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'm going to hand this over to Jon Reisch, our effects supervisor.
Thanks, Bobby. Right, so I'm Jon Reisch. I'm the effects supervisor in Cars 3. And like Bobby, I've been in the Cars world for a long time. I started at Pixar as an intern in the effects department, worked on all the films, worked on a bunch of the shorts. So it's a world that's really near and dear to my heart. So in effects, we're primarily responsible for all the natural phenomena you see in the world. So all the water, fire, smoke, sand, dust, and debris, anything that our characters are interacting with and kicking up as they sort of move along in a very realistic and sort of realized world we've constructed for Cars 3. So this film, we're really where the rubber meets the road. All that tire smoke, all the skid marks get left, the little tire marbles get kicked up, that's all work from my team. And of course, in our Thunder Hollow Crazy 8 sequence, we were responsible for the mud as well. Lots and lots of mud, which was probably the biggest effects challenge for us on the film. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in just a bit here. But, really for me, why our work is so important to this story in particular is to go back to what Bobby said. My team's providing this believable interaction that really grounds our characters to the world. There's a sense of something tangible happening as they take hairpin turns, they blast through this mud puddle at 60 miles an hour. And that's sort of the visual component of that physicality and that tangible realism that we're going for in the film. If we do that really, really well, then from a storytelling point of view, we can help create emotional stakes for the characters. We can put them into danger. They can get hurt, like you're seeing here in this crash sequence you saw in the teaser. There's something that's really visceral and powerful and really unexpected about seeing Lightning McQueen, who's our hero, turning end over end in slow motion, getting showered by sparks and trailing all this engine smoke, which again is some of the work that my team was able to realize in the film. So that sense of realism, that detail that we're able to bring out through our effects work really helps our audience identify with and emote for our characters, and that's really what it's all about in the end. So how do we do it? One of the things that sets us apart in the effects department is our use of physical simulation software to do our work. So these simulators are programs that are imbued with certain kinds of laws of physics that they know about that can help us move and create our elements. And our artists are using very physical parameters as inputs into these simulations. And a lot of this come directly out of the animation performance that we get from Bobby and his team. So things like how fast the car's moving, how much the wheels are spinning, whether or not they're locked and sliding and slipping, or they have traction on the ground. We use all those inputs to sort of determine when we're going to kick up tire smoke and leave tread marks. We're even simulating the airflow around the cars for the first time in Cars 3, which just gives us this extra sense of realism. You feel the suction and the power of these cars that are moving by 200 miles an hour. And we're able to do that on a scale that I don't think we've been able to do in the past, which is really exciting for us. And while that may sound really technical, really at the end of the day, what we're looking for is concerned with sort of the fundamental animation principles of giving a sense of weight, of scale for our effects elements that matches up and is appropriate to the way that Bobby and his team have animated the characters. So what's so hard about mud? Mud is one of the biggest challenges, like I mentioned earlier. Mud is just one of those things that it's not really a liquid, it's not really a solid, it's sort of somewhere in between. And that's just a terribly difficult thing for us to simulate in the computer and to get that realistic look to. So as a story point in Thunder Hollow, Brian was really clear the audience needs to understand that unless you're moving through this puddle fast enough, you're going to get stuck. And there's consequences to that. You really don't want to be stuck with Miss Fritter on the loose in the Crazy 8 track. So just like Bobby had mentioned in animation, we also want to be true to our materials and effects. We took a look at a lot of different elements and did our research just to try to figure out what are the components of the way that mud moves, that it breaks up, how wet is it, how gloopy is it, how stuck together is it, that we want to try to replicate with our simulated elements. I remember Brian saying that, in our first meeting, kind of kick off about what he wanted from the mud, said, well, make it like chunky oatmeal that's in soup. So that was the first thing we had to sort of decode and decipher what that actually meant. And so we just experiment and experiment and experiment. Effects is a very iterative process to sort of find out what the truth is to the way that stuff moves, the kind of details. And these experiments look terrible. And they look terrible for a really long time. It's a really uncomfortable point to be in the show where we're trying to figure out how we're going to tackle this and explore. You can see some of this looks like, cake frosting or liquid chocolate. And, we finally kind of start to get to a point where, okay, we're starting to get something that feels more appropriate. It's got a little bit more detail. It's a little bit more controllable. We're going to start to bring in some more detail that gives it a sense of scale and feels like it's moving in the right way. So from a dynamic standpoint, this kind of represents, something that's sort of poking at the right direction. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And to get to the final images that you see in the film, we have to do a lot of work across departments to sort of realize that. So for example, here's our effects mud puddle in the center of the track. We work really closely with a set shading artist to make sure that the dirt that's around the puddle feels like it's soaked in with water. It feels like it's integrated in and it's really supporting this idea of the mud being there. We're going to kick up these really high resolution splashes, and when they hit the characters, they need to splat and sort of drip down the sides of their faces a little bit. And then, of course, we have to hand that off to our character shading artist to make sure that in all the continuity shots, Miss Fritter still feels like she's been hit by mud. So there's no question that the audience kind of realizes that happened. We also work really closely with lighting to make sure the mud responds to light appropriately, that it matches the sort of wetness and the kind of look and texture and feel that we want to get out of it, and it fits in and integrates well with the characters and then with the set. We're also directing the eye to the right part of the frame. And since it's an action sequence, we only have fractions of a second to get across the story point in the shot. So we have to be really aware of where the camera is, and in a lot of cases, make sure that we're not detracting from what you're supposed to be seeing. In some of these first, early examples of the shot, the mud's coming right into camera and kind of blacking out the frame. And so we needed to bring it down, until in the final image, in the rendered view, you can kind of see that, what's actually happening in the background of the scene. So the challenge for us was really just do that in 160 shots, coordinating across half a dozen departments, all while keeping a consistent, highly crafted, and realistic look. And we'll be good, right? No problem. So lucky for us at Pixar, and especially with this Cars 3 crew, we have some of the most amazingly talented effects, lighting, shading, and technical artists in the game. And I feel like I'm just incredibly proud of the level of work that we were able to accomplish in this sequence and across the show. And actually in some of the sequences you guys haven't even had a chance to see yet, there's some really exciting stuff. And for me, I think Cars 3 is another level of scale and complexity of effects work that we're able to bring to the studio, which is kind of in the tradition of the Cars films, really asking us to up our game and add more to what we've been able to do. So ultimately, we're at our best when the effects elements we create are helping support the storytelling in the film. And Thunder Hollow really gives us a chance, to allow that to shine and to come through. So it's a raucous and bombastic sequence, but the effects are able to play kind of a front and center role in really putting our audience in there in the chaos with our characters. So with that, let me turn it over to Michael Fong, who's our Supervising Technical Director.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Michael Fong. I'm the Supervising Technical Director of Cars 3. And I'd like to talk about this mantra, story is king. I'm not actually going to talk about story, because there's going to be a whole other group that you may have or will soon be just talking to you about story and the story development process. But I'd like to talk about this kind of mantra that's kind of burned into all Pixar employees when they first come in through the doors and sticks with us for a really long time. The first is, what does this phrase really mean? I mean, you guys might have heard us say it, and does it mean anything more than just have a good story? And really, why am I talking about this? Why is a technical guy talking about this at all? And as it turns out, the mantra story is king affects every single department at Pixar, including the technical ones, and it affects us all in significant ways. So, in its most obvious form, story is king means that the story is the most important aspect of our movie. So everything that Bobby's animators are doing, everything that Jon's effects artists are doing, it's all in the service of the storytelling. So again, if we look back at the Crazy 8 sequence, all the explosions, the burning tires, the mud, all of it is there to tell that McQueen is out of his element. He is frightened for his life. So if the acting or storytelling is ever obscured by the mud, dust, or effects, they will purposely be diminished because we have to make sure we're getting across the point. McQueen is scared for his life. And as John can attest, if the explosions are ever too big or too cool even, we have to tone them down because we're distracting away from the storytelling and the acting. So going back, the whole point about the story point with the Crazy 8 sequence is that McQueen is out of his element, and he's overwhelmed with legitimate fear, anger, and embarrassment. And it has to be legitimate. You have to feel this is real, because later on, he lashes out at Cruz. Now, for instance, if the Crazy 8 sequence is too funny or too much of an effect spectacle, you kind of wouldn't think that McQueen was all freaked out, and it wouldn't motivate why he's lashing out at Cruz. It wouldn't feel real. We haven't earned it. We can also lose legitimacy and hurt our storytelling if the world, and especially the stakes, don't feel real enough. So here, Fritter has to feel like a scary school bus. As much as a school bus can be scary, as much as the flames coming out of her exhaust pipes, as much as her spinning saw blade of death, you have to believe that she's willing to cause damage to McQueen. Or at least you have to believe that McQueen thinks that she's willing to cause damage to McQueen. And without that tangible realism, we're not doing our best for the storytelling. So along the same lines of tangible realism, we're trying to make the world just feel as real as possible because this grounds the story and grounds the acting, grounds everything for us. So here's an example shot from when McQueen is first entering the Rust-eze Racing Center. This is where he's going to go and do his new training regimen. And, okay, the shot looks kind of okay. There's light coming in from the skylight, shining down on kind of a glass building. That's well and great. But here we're doing a bit more. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to calculate what the actual light is doing. We're actually doing something called global illumination, and we're trying to figure out the light is coming down from the skylight. It's bouncing off this red 95. It's bleeding color, red color, onto the ground. That's then bouncing off the ground and hitting the windows. From the windows, it's then reflecting and refracting. And here's the final image of the scene as you guys saw it. Now we've added atmosphere, so we're trying to figure out how does the light propagate through this atmosphere, this fog. We've also increased the number of reflections and bounces. We do this with our environments because we're just trying to ground everything, make everything feel that much more tangible to the audience. And we're doing the same for our materials for our cars and our environments. So in this particular case, we have a car. It's kind of an off-white color, pistachio skin color. And this is our diffuse pass. This is what you guys can think of in your cars, more like kind of the base coat paint. I want an off-white car, this is kind of what they give you. This picture is a bit of an odd one. This is actually the specular reflection or the specular response or the reflection pass on a car. You can think of it as your gloss coat. This is where you also see a lot of the scratches in case someone's incorrectly polished your car and they left all those scratches because they had too much dirt in their pad. That's kind of what you see here. And when you combine these pictures together, what you're getting is the base coat combined with your gloss coat, and you get something that's hopefully more tangible and more real compared to the other Cars movies. That hopefully feels like a car that you can kind of reach out and touch. And in fact, sometimes we have to combat the feeling that it feels like a toy because it feels too much like you can reach out and touch it. We don't want it to feel like toys. We want it to feel like characters and cars. Doc Hudson, Lightning McQueen's mentor. I include this image really mostly because I really like the hand painting that you can see kind of in the lettering and the numbers in the 51. Okay, that's all well and good. But to be honest, we don't actually want photoreal. You'll hear photoreal a lot, but we don't want photoreal. Because photoreal is not, or reality actually, is not the most aesthetically pleasing. And it's actually not always what's best for the story. To be honest, what we want is directed realism. The shot I chose to kind of exemplify this is McQueen racing for his life. And he's being overtaken by a storm. And aesthetically, we really like this kind of shot because it's a nighttime racing shot. And at nighttime, the racetracks have these what are called track lights, which are on the inside screen right there. They're on the infield. And they're shining out on these shiny cars. And you're seeing these great little reflections and highlights zooming by on kind of McQueen's sides and even on Storm's sides. That's all beautiful. But here's what physics would say the actual shot should look like. Just straight physics. So what's happening now is that Storm and McQueen are both kind of dark. You're not really sure where your eyes should be. Are you should be looking at that kind of bright, safer barrier on the left? Are the track lights actually what the focus of the shot is? And worse, the reflections and highlights that I really liked when I previously showed it to you, they're now like going around his mouth. Like, imagine you're watching a movie and your actor has all these LED lights like shining around his mouth. You're not paying attention to what his mouth is doing anymore. You're kind of like wondering, what the heck did that guy eat? And the whole point of this shot right here is that McQueen is trying really hard. He's giving it all he's got. And look, Storm's not. Storm's just passing him by. But you're not reading that if you're distracted by the physics. So we break the physics. We take physics as far as we possibly can take it. We ground the world as much as we possibly can. But in the end, we built a whole other set of tools to make sure that physics doesn't get in the way of the storytelling, because the storytelling is the most important part. Okay, so storytelling, coming through, is one of the most obvious intents of the story is king mantra. But there's less obvious results. Like I mentioned, there's a whole other group that's going to be talking about the story development process. And what they're going to tell you is that it's an iterative process. They draw storyboards, they put up their gags, they put up their character arcs, they put up their ideas, and then they look at them and they say, is that funny or is it not funny? Is that working or not working? And they tear it all down, and they do it all over again. And they do this hundreds, if not thousands of times. And they need lots and lots of time. They would take an infinite amount of time, to be honest, if they could. But the movie needs to be in theaters, June 16th. So if you imagine here's a simplified representation of our production pipeline. Now the details aren't super important, which is basically each blue box represents a department. But the way to think of it is our movie is broken down into shots. We have to break everything down. We have a really giant movie. We can't work on it all at once. So you want manageable chunks. Bite-sized manageable chunks that you work on. We call them shots. And we move them through this pipeline. It starts from the left, goes over to the right. And probably one of the most important things, or one of the important things about the movie, is that we need all the shots in that rightmost box before 6:16. Otherwise, terrible things will happen. So this process takes a while, and we have to start turning this crank. We have to be pushing these shots through. And so we start as early as we possibly can. But while we're doing this, story is still going. Story is still making every single scene, every single story arc, every single gag that much more funny. They're constantly coming up like, how can I perfect that one point where McQueen makes that one joke? How can I make that punchline? A little more timing there. Does Mater need to be punched up a little bit? They're still going. And so the strange thing happens where art is driving technical. Story and art and animation too are demanding all kinds of things from technical. Hey, we want a giant mud puddle that everybody's driving through. We want giant barrels with this explosive gas inside of them. And by the way, we want the forest to all move when there's a giant explosion and all kinds of craziness. And we're kind of like wild-eyed at them and saying, sure, we'll do what we possibly can. And we start fleshing out the world. And when we start showing this world to both animation and to story and to art, it starts giving them feedback on what they're building in their mind. Because remember, they're just working with storyboards, little hand-drawn things. And suddenly they start realizing, oh, this is what Crazy 8 actually looks like. And now I understand where I can have Cruz hide out when she needs to, because she can't be part of the race in the very beginning of Crazy 8. She actually needs to be scared. Oh, and now I understand how to solve this one particular gag that just wasn't coming across because I've forgotten that Max Trader looks a particular way. So art is driving technical, technical is influencing art. But going back to the other point, story still moving while production is moving forward, cranking out shots. That kind of seems like a recipe for disaster. You have the people kind of saying what the story is about, and the people who are making the story kind of going at the same time. But surprisingly, it actually all works for us. So I kind of lied when I said this was our production pipeline. Instead of this, we actually have something that looks more like this. What happens is that we want story to give us fixes. We want the story to be as great as it possibly can. And so if they have fixes, they are doled out to all the departments. There is not a single department on Cars 3 that hasn't been affected by a story fix, where we've been asked to redo and even scrap all of the work. It's heartbreaking sometimes, but we all kind of hold hands and trust each other, and we do this. We embrace the idea of getting fixes, story fixes late. We have built our entire production pipeline around the idea that story must be constantly improving. And in order for it to do so, technical and other departments must be able to absorb these changes and even discard work at almost any time. We actually design our tools, our workflow, and our schedule to account for this. And this is how the mantra, story is king, permeates throughout every department at Pixar. In my opinion, this is probably one of the studio's greatest challenges, but it's also one of our greatest strengths. The grounding in the acting, the truth to materials, the visual realism in the effects, it's all there to make sure that the storytelling is tangible and relatable to the audience. And this is what we hope for when we say story is king. We are trying to engage you with a story that we love to tell. Questions? For anybody.
So how do you guys know when you're working on the mud, and given that the shading and the lighting really help make it feel tangible in the end, how do you know when your team has gotten it far enough that it's ready to hand off to those guys? How do you know that it's I've gotten it as good as it can be?
It's not quite as as linear a process as that. It's really more of something that kind of loops back and forth. So we'll put out an early version of what we think is starting to work. Shading will take a pass at that. We'll work really closely with the set shaders on the show to sort of get some of the muddy detail in there. The lighting is constantly advancing. We're really all in there working at the same time. And so I think, it's just all of us sort of throwing our A game at the problem And then ultimately over time, we see the images develop and evolve to a point where we're happy with them, where Brian's happy with it, and mainly that it's supporting the story that he's trying to tell.
Assume you have somebody checking, like, she had a mud spot above her eye, and I'll make sure that mud spot's there in every future shot after that. There's a lot of detail.
There's definitely some continuity issues like that. We also get away with a lot. I won't reveal all of our secrets, but yeah, there's not every single mud splat is accounted for, but we definitely want you to feel like, you know, they've been in this world, that if something happened where, you know, Fritter gets mud on her face, that we reflect that. There's not something that makes you question it, that pulls you out of the storytelling and the action that's going on.
Was that the Pizza Planet truck and the demolition derby?
Maybe.
Confirmed or denied.
Keep an eye on it.
Yes.
You talked about breaking the reality with the lighting on the racetrack. Are you attempting to come up with a source, like, oh, maybe there's a bigger light above them, or track lighting, or is that just we're just going to throw this light on the car without really considering where it might be coming from?
I guess if you're asking, do we just break physics willy-nilly kind of thing? What we really rely on is our director of photographer lighting, and we have two actually, and what their job is to make sure that A, physics is not getting away with the storytelling, but also when we do cheats, that they feel believable. So we don't necessarily always we don't put like some big giant light above to make sure that McQueen is kind of well lit. But what we do is make sure that when we have McQueen well lit, it doesn't seem overly obvious. It doesn't feel like there's a spotlight that should be coming from somewhere that's not motivated, right? So we have to rely on kind of artistic skills to blend this back into the world and make sure that people don't feel it. So like, if you felt it while you're watching the movie, then we kind of failed at that. But if you didn't feel it, that's kind of where we went.
Yeah, and in some cases that may mean a fix that goes back up to the set to actually install track lighting in a certain area.
It
helps motivate that, right? It's some idea.
Kind of a question about like where do you draw the line between what the animators do and what is effects, specifically with Crazy 8, where cars are getting smashed into and broken apart. Is that something the animators have to do, of like where the dents occur, or is that more on the effects side?
You know, we had this really great benefit, kind of like what John was saying, where we have to really work together and trust each other. As we were starting to do those early animation tests and say, oh, this is what we're coming up with, sometimes we would draw things in as placeholders. John and his team gave us these really, really great little small kind of like packets of effects that we could insert in. So we would crash cars, and he would say, "Here's an explosion." You can insert in and stuff, or here's some dust, or whatever. And we'd start placing them in these little sequences we were building to test it out. And then we could show that to our director, and Brian could react to that and say, "Oh, I like how this feels," or "Oh, I don't." And that gives John and his team kind of a jumping off point, and then he can actually make it look even more amazing.
It was great how much that working upstream for us. Because typically, you know, we'll inherit sort of the animation, like you said, of the cars, you know, crashing into each other, and then we'll do things like add the debris and all that kind of stuff. But getting a chance to work with Bobby and his team and give Brian that context up front really changed how I think we went into that sequence. You know, with action sequences, it's tough anyway because you really find the storytelling through the way that those shots are pieced together and how it's edited, and we're constantly sort of rearranging it to sort of make sure that you get the through line and then, you know, really punching up certain moments. But being able to start that process earlier with animation and with Brian being on board was great. I think that benefited all of us, and it came through.
How can you deliver those effects to Bobby, given that you're working in two completely different software?
They're just different representations. It's a, you know, small kind of pre-canned thing. It's not going to be timed out perfectly. It's not going to be super scale appropriate. It won't be the final thing. It's all throwaway, but still, even that sort of gives you an idea about where it's headed, where it's going to go.
How any of these brilliant minds do this computer stuff? But this is, you know, there was that slide up there that Michael had where it says. Art drives the technology inspires the art. And you know, this is kind of a mantra that I think John Lasseter, you know, came up with. And it is ridiculously true. Because I will see things every single day that the technical folks will come up with. And I'll go, "Oh my gosh, wait a second. If you could do that, then I want to make this." And they'll go, "Oh my gosh, no, what? You want to do that? But then we have to, okay, wait a second, no, we can't. Oh, maybe we can. I don't know. Okay, we figured this out. And they do this. Actually, it's one of my favorite things is we'll come up with some. This happens all the time. We'll come up with some like thing we want to make. We say we want to do this sequence or these animated things or whatever because this is why it's really important in the story and I want them to feel like this. And a lot of times, technical folks we go like, oh, we can't do that. That's impossible. We don't know how to do it. Wait a second, we might, but maybe we can't. Okay, we might be able to do it. Okay, we figured it out. And what's so great and inspiring about that, they don't say it like that, it's kind of like that. But what's so great and inspiring about it is there is a faith in the partnership we have of art and technology that gets to the very root of what Pixar is. And we're all aiming for the same goal. And it's not to make beautiful animation. It's not to make beautiful technology. It's to make these films that are really, really emotionally affecting people. And because we know that, it's a fantastic partnership to work in.
Did you have a question? I missed your hand.
Oh, I was recording. I guess I can just say, you had mentioned, I'll have one now. You mentioned as far as not wanting to do some of your research, as far as not wanting to do your research, but not wanting to do the demolition derby. Does that imply that either of you gentlemen did?
I think we had people that went to demolition derbies. Yeah. I don't think we would actually.
No one actually
allowed to go to demolition derbies. Various legal reasons.
Yeah. I do have plenty of home video of us playing in mud that we didn't really get our hands literally dirty with, which is good. It's important to sort of like get in there and really have that sort of like experience with it. So.
Do you guys have the whole backstory of Cars World figured out? Do you know like where their brains are, how other new cars are born, and that sort of thing, or you kind of figure that out when you?
There are certain questions. Now, being on this film from the first day. Like I said, I was the first animator on this film in the summer of 2001, and we were on Cars. On the first Cars, not on Cars 3. Yeah. These films take a while. It didn't take that long. To build a language and to build a world where you can really get into that suspension of disbelief. I mean, that's always been the goal, right? It's like any filmmaking, where if you looked too far left to the set of the backdrop, you might see it's a painted backdrop in live action or something, But if you're there, you're down the city streets of Paris, or you're in New York, or you're whatever. And for the Cars world, we just wanted to feel like you're there, you're in this world, and it's believable. And it's a hard trick to pull off. And the fact that this whole world has been able to be so expansive and so rich like that has been really satisfying to do. To be from like day one, like here's the first line of this world encyclopedia to what it's become.
But there's no kind of like written Bible you guys go back to look at, or
there's actually we have design style guides and style languages that we do. We actually have whole guides for the Cars world in terms of how we approach things, how we approach kind of the carification of the world, how we approach characters and design, and how we approach movement and styling and stuff. Because we really want to try to make sure that there's a consistency to it. Because it says if this is the box we're saying of this world, let's make sure that we really know how that's defined. So we try to be very, very consistent with it.
You ever have things like, we want this character to throw a ball. We're like, how would he throw a ball? How would he hold a ball?
We always have this happen. Actually, in story, this happens all the time, where we say story will come to animation and say, we need to do this. And I'll tell them the same thing I'll tell the animators. Approach a sequence, approach a scene, and don't think of it like a box, like a box on wheels, or like how would a car act. Approach it like you would act it out, right? And then once you commit to that, find a way to translate it into that world. So you'll watch this film and you'll see characters doing something and you'll go, oh, I know what that means. Oh, I know what that gesture means. Oh, I know what that's doing. If you actually step back, they're probably just tilting this way and doing like this at the wheel. But how we're doing it conveys a feeling of something. And that's the goal.
What does that one answer to?
I don't know.
So, cool. So, the beginning questions that I'm asking everybody, favorite new character in the film? So rapid fire types.
Cruise. Got to be Cruise.
Yeah, agreed.
Cruise all the way around.
Yeah,
okay.
totally.
How about if you're a car person? How about favorite car, whether it be a NASCAR car or a street car in real life?
Oh, man, that's tough.
I like Volvos.
Okay. I'm just saying that.
I'm excited for electric cars. I'm excited to see them take off.
Yeah, so I'm with Mike on that. Tesla. The new sort of Tesla kind of sport utility that has the gullwing doors. Yeah. Very, very fancy.
I'd love to see an electric Volvo. All right, I like it. All right, so I had all these questions here, and then when you guys were talking, I got a new one that I had to throw in.
Great.
So you mentioned that it's the first time you're simulating air around the car.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, basically as a pre-pass to running our sort of smoke simulations or our dust simulations, what we would do is actually just take the animation as it was and run it through and do a fluid simulation as if we were moving through the volume of air. We were simulating the motion of the air around the car, right? So we would get a field of velocities out of that we could then use as a force. In addition to the other forces, the other kinds of ways that we control our simulations for the smoke, to just make sure that it felt like it had sort of suction behind the car, that you get this extra realism, detail, and sort of eddies that kind of swirl behind the car. Mm-hmm. If you look at a lot of reference, you'll see that kind of interaction. Yeah. So trying to capture that and do it in a really kind of realistic way was something we were after.
Yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous. I
cool.
mean, when McQueen is flipping, and you get where you can see the underside of him.
Yeah.
I love how you can see the air kind of coil in.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then turn back around. And then there was... Oh, sorry.
And it's cool that it's driven by the animation performance, mm-hmm. right? That we get the that kind of physicality out of the animation directly.
Yeah, and then the other time I saw it was when the cars were... It was a camera real low to the ground, cars are going by, and then in the puddles.
Yeah.
It kind of pulled the water over.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, so I believe in the first Cars film,
mm-hmm.
Since you were attached to it for so long, there was a note that I had heard that the barbed wire that was wrapped around McQueen when he first got into town was painstaking. It had to be hand animated. So, was there something that was like that in this film that had to be just either really tough or had to be hand animated, even if it was something small like that?
I believe I answered that. That was my third answer. Yes, it was challenging, but we found a way through it. Things that were really, really tough. This whole sequence, the Crazy 8 sequence we showed you was really tough. It was really long. It was the first sequence we really started experimenting with and doing animation tests. And it went on for a number of months because it was really complex. It was complex in terms of working with several different departments to coordinate, to make sure we knew how it was going to finally look. It was complex in terms of how we were trying to get character-driven entertainment through this, and how it was shot, and how we needed you to feel, and how we need to get these story points across, and the pacing of it. It was complex, and all of these different characters we were treating in a different way. So the complexity of it was challenging, but it was very, very rewarding as a sequence, because you really do feel what it feels like to be McQueen and to be Cruz in the middle of the sequence at the end, and that's the goal. But it was not easy. But man, when you see it in a theater, it feels great.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's almost a short film unto itself.
It is.
It's a full 6 or 7 minutes of the film just in that one sequence.
Yeah, I was just talking to Jay Ward, and I was telling him, I'm like, that's like a little boy's dream. That whole scene, like everything just crashing together in mud,
totally,
and sparks. I mean, it was just, I was in heaven in that moment.
That's
when we
awesome.
were in the screener. So good. Yeah. All right. So from a technical standpoint, one of the things I think about, you may have been involved on this on Inside Out, was the roiling skin. That originally it was like, there's no way, how do we make this happen on all these characters? What was something like that it was brought to you originally? I mean, you guys kind of joked about it already, that it was like, no, we can't do that, maybe we can. Yes, we can, no, we can't. So like, was there something like that on this film that mirrored that?
I mean, John and I were just talking about how kind of the mud was actually kind of this scary thing. He had somebody working on it for about 6 months, and to be honest, it's the early pictures are a little rough, right? All those kinds of things are a little rough. But really, kind of when I think about technical challenges, I kind of think about just how much risk you have to take, because you want to make sure that the story has room to grow and continue to change. And so we want story to don't feel any pressure from technical. We want as much as possible story. You have time to make this stuff awesome. We will purposely work on these other things kind of on the side. And that's all very risky. That's the kind of thing that kind of keeps you up at night. Like, am I doing the right thing here? Are we okay moving forward on the mud? Is Crazy going to be in the sequence, or is Jon going to get his heart broken and it's going to be cut from the movie, and all 6 months of work is just going to be gone?
Yeah,
so that's tough on us.
Yeah,
that's scary.
Obviously, again, being involved for so long, and your role today being it was supervising animator. Did you roll your sleeves up and animate any scenes in the movie?
I have 3 shots I animated in the film, which took me longer than they should have because I was doing various other things.
Sure, that's a good excuse.
I'm going to use. Thank you. You're the best. It's all about support. We're supportive of each other. No, I animated 3 shots with Chick Hicks, where you first cut in and he's on his little whatever it's sports talk show thing, RSN. And it was fun. I mean, it's fun to me. I actually had never animated Chick up until this. On the first one, I didn't do any shots with him, so it was kind of fun to animate a new character.
Cool.
But it was also a chance to kind of try to slide in, some little gags that you might not notice until like the 12th time watching it. Like when Chick's trophy stand comes up from the floor, it gets stuck, and then it goes down and gets stuck, and then it comes up and gets stuck again. Until finally makes it, because Chick gets no respect, and so even the trophy stand doesn't respect him. When you see Chick put up a picture of himself with the trophies, I wanted it to look like kind of those 1980s, Sears portraits with lasers and everything, and staring off into space and the soft edges.
Yeah, the gray background.
The gray background.
Yeah.
Or even when you cut away to the people manning the cameras, if you look in the back. I gave them all like, okay, they got personalities. The cameraman, the person doing the script, like you're off script, and then you have the producer who's just, not paying attention, just kind of staring, and then you have the person falling asleep in the back. And no one's gonna notice this stuff for like the 12th time around. And I love doing that stuff where you can just try to we're just gonna layer a little bit. We're gonna shove a little in the corner there. Someone will find this eventually.
Yeah, well, they absolutely do.
Yeah,
that's what we do. That's
absolutely.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun. So you can look for that stuff now.
Yeah. Perfect. I love it. Just circling back to that Crazy 8 scene. Mm-hmm. So did that come together quickly, or was that something that had to really evolve over time?
It had to evolve. I mean,
because it just felt so natural.
Glad it felt natural. Give this man more time.
Yeah, I mean, with any action sequence in a movie, it's one of those things that it goes through a lot of passes of editorial to try to figure out what the right arrangement of shots is to sort of make sure that we can punch it up as much as we can, while maintaining the through line of the action that you can follow through. If it was just all chaos all the time, it wouldn't really be entertaining. Wouldn't get the story across, right? So there was definitely a lot of back and forth to try to figure out what those shots were, how they were being put together, and then what we needed to prioritize in terms of the work that we were tackling, and really going and working hand in hand with Bobby about we've got to get into these shots first because it's the toughest mud stuff that we have. We know we're going to take a little bit longer time to cook those, and then there's a few others that don't have any effects in them, although there's very few in that sequence. So,
sure, sure.
But definitely something that's hugely collaborative and took a while for sure.
Yeah, those are usually my favorite scenes as far as the ones that are so cross-departmental.
Yeah.
Where you get everybody that has got their hands in it.
That's it. Yeah, everybody's bringing their A game. We're bringing all this technology to bear on it, and it's all done to sort of reinforce this very grounded, sort of tangible realism that we're trying to go for in the film that matches up so beautifully with just the grounded emotional stakes in the story that Brian's trying to tell. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Hey,
great.
Thank you.
And,
I'll tell you, that was a fun session at the end there.
I was going to say, it sounded like you guys all hit it off.
We did have some fun. It was, I was cracking up with the whole, and I've been thinking about it still when I was re-editing this, give this man some more time. That's just...
I remember you telling me that when it happened, after the fact.
So here's something that I can give you a little bit of behind the scenes as well. So 2 things. Number 1, in that one-on-one session, I asked that final question, and they had kind of already answered it before. So, not to embarrass myself, but you know what? It's real life and it happens. So many times when you're in these situations, you're in a room. When you're in the one-on-one, it's you. It's whoever you're talking to.
Yeah.
And you're in a private room. And so you're in charge of essentially driving that conversation. Driving. I just heard it. I just heard it.
It's kind of intimidating in a way.
It is, because, you don't do it every day.
Yeah, I remember when I spoke with Sharon Callahan for The Good Dinosaur, I was just like, and I think I asked 2 questions, and I was just so flustered.
Thanks, bye.
I just, just because we had been fans of her for so long, and I just felt like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So for this one, I had asked a question that they had kind of already answered in an earlier comment in the one-on-one, not in the earlier session. And I realized it after listening to it back later. I mean, they handled it great, but, it's one of those things where it's like you're in the moment, you're hearing them respond, so you're trying to actively listen, yet come up with your next question at the same time.
Or look down at your next
and look at your notes
but not...
while still engaging with them.
Yes.
It's a tricky thing.
It is.
It's a tricky thing. So that's just a little interview background as far as for how we talk about it. You guys...
You do a great job, though.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, I prep for weeks ahead of time.
Right.
I'm coming up with questions. And then while I'm in their sessions, because the thing is who you're going to talk to for the one-on-ones ahead of time. And you work up questions. Most of those questions that I have worked up get answered in the session.
Yeah.
So while you're in the session, you're listening to that and being like,
and formulating
oh man,
new
what other questions am I going to now formulate on top of this to replace all these that I had that are now gone?
To fill 10 minutes. And you think 10 minutes goes quick, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And
when I spoke with Robert Kondo on Monsters University, my time went so quick. I could have kept talking with him.
Yeah, it's hard, because then you also got to figure, you got to come up with questions for everybody there too. You can't have like all of them for just Michael or just Bobby or whatever. So yeah, it's a fun thing.
You have spoke, I think, to more of a group, where I've spoken to more people one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, I did one-on-ones too, because like Ralph Eggleston was one of those, like a Sharon Callahan for you. When I was talking to Ralph, I was like, oh, okay, this is really Ralph right here.
Right. Right.
It was one of those moments. The other thing is you heard me ask a question in the overall session, and what it was is when we're recording these, we have our little voice recorder that we have with us, and in the room, the reporters, there's maybe 10 of us in the room. The other guy that was asking one of the group questions was way on the other side of the room, and I don't even know who it was at this point. But I had to hold the recorder up above my head so that way the microphones would be pointed towards him.
At his voice.
So that if not, it was just going to be still pointed at John, Michael, and Bobby.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to hear.
Right. So when I was doing that, why you heard that impromptu question from Michael is he thought I had my hand up waiting to ask the next question.
So you came up with a question on the fly.
It was a question on the fly, and that's why I stuttered through it at the beginning, where I was like, you didn't want to do your research. No, I didn't mean you didn't want to do your research. What I meant was... Yeah. So I kept it in just because I thought it was kind of silly.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
It's real.
It is.
Yeah.
They still had fun with it, too.
Yeah, I mean, they still chuckled, and then John springboarded off of that anyways and talked about that they had, the recorded footage of all the mud that they had...
From the derbies.
Well, just that they had done themselves in the studio, that they were digging through mud and at home and streets and everything like that. So really cool stuff. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that interview on the production side, the pipeline side from Michael, Bobby, and John. But we always wrap up now with our Ask Pixar Post segment. And this one is actually, it just came through anonymously on our site. There was no name attached to it or anything like that. And it's a simple question. I thought I was going to use this one, though, because it tied in with Chick Hicks and Michael Keaton, even though he's not voicing it this time and it's Bob Peterson. Which character that Michael Keaton voices do you like more, Ken or Chick Hicks?
You answer first.
Okay. So I thought about this a lot. I mean, Chick Hicks is hilarious. Right. He's cocky.
I have my answer.
Okay. But Ken, and it's also the writing that makes the difference too.
It's hard because Ken is endearing and Chick Hicks is just and silly. And
right. My gut instinct said to go with Ken. And I'll tell you why. Hawaiian Vacation.
Yeah.
Because and it's an unfair advantage because Chick isn't in the shorts in the same way that Ken is in the tunes.
Right.
But just when he's when he's in the backpack crying, and when he does you thought Bonnie was going to bring her school backpack on vacation? And he's like, what?
Yeah.
And he just does that, and then he's crying, and he comes out, and just all that stuff. Groovy. I thought this was a hotel.
Yeah, see, now that we're talking about it, see, my gut was Chick Hicks.
Really?
Yeah, and now that we're talking about it, I'm like, gosh, I think I really do like Ken's character better. But is it the character
or the
I like,
voice?
or the voice I like?
It was a good question, Anonymous.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm still going to stick with my gut. I think I'm still going to say Chick Hicks.
Fantastic. I'm going to say Ken.
Oh.
That's right. High five. So we covered them both. All right, so that's the only one that we're going to ask this week. We're just going to keep things moving. But if you have a question for us that you want to ask, whether it be Pixar related or just something fun, like last week somebody asked us about if Jurassic World were real, would you go? Like a hypothetical question, whatever it might be. Or if you just want to get to know us a little bit more, we've told us some crazy stories. And we forgot again to talk about your bus fire story.
Oh, yeah.
We'll still save it because this one's a longer one at this point. We're already at over an hour.
Yeah.
All right, so I believe that about wraps it up. What do you think?
I think so.
All right, so be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, or subscribe to our podcast on... And subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts served to you.
Oh, still good attempt. Good attempt.
Thanks. So lastly, if you like today's show, let us know. Rate us on iTunes, leave a comment on our site, or send us an email at info@pixarpost.com. Also going to send a quick shout out to Brittany in the forums who sent us a message through there saying how much she appreciated the last episode where we talked with Jay Schuster, Michael Comet, Jude Brownbill about the character design, rigging, and animation. We're glad you enjoyed it as much as we did. Mm-hmm. So signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye-bye.